You're listening to episode 183 of the Master Your Mind, Business, and Life podcast. I was originally going to wait until next Wednesday to launch this episode, but then I thought, no way! This information needs to be shared before we ring in the new year. Speaking of the new year, can you believe we're calling it a wrap on 2020? If you missed my 2020 recap episode, be sure to go back and listen to that after you listen to today's episode. And speaking of today, this week I am joined by returning guest and one of my favorites, the practical numerologist, Felicia Bender. Felicia Bender is an author and is also the resident numerologist for astrostyle.com. She is also a frequent contributor for the Elephant Journal, numerologist.com, the Numinous, and many other media outlets. Felicia has joined us on other episodes. I encourage you to go back and check those out, especially if numerology is new to you. Go all the way back to episode 30 for a general numerology breakdown. It will really help you grasp and understand numbers and the vibrations that they carry. Today, we are talking all about the universal 5-year that 2020 will be. And of course, we're also getting a recap of what our universal 4-year was and how it kind of prepared us for the 5-year. Be sure to screenshot that you're listening, share that screenshot on Instagram stories, tag me in it at MindBizLife, and of course, don't forget to tell me what resonated most with you today in this episode. I love interacting with you on social media. Seriously, it lights up my world. I feel like I've made friends all over the world, and it's like the coolest thing to check in with you guys. This week's episode is brought to you by Spiritually Seeking. When you visit spiritually-seeking.com and use the promo code PODCAST at checkout, you can save up to 20% on numerology reports, affirmation cards, and one-on-one life guidance sessions. Visit spiritually-seeking.com and enter the promo code PODCAST at checkout to save 20%. Are you ready to meet Felicia? You know what to do. Tune in, turn it up, let's go.
You're listening to Master Your Mind, Business, and Life. Conversations with everyday world shifters, truth seekers, and rule breakers. Here's your host, Lauren Smith.
We have a treat today. One of my favorite guests is back. Felicia, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm exuberant to be ringing in 2021, I have to admit.
Yes. Oh my goodness, because 2020 has been a doozy. And I will just preface this by having the audience keep in mind that right now while we're recording, we're doing this all ahead of time. And right now in this moment, we have no idea what's going to happen in the election. We have no idea what's going to play out with COVID by the end of 2020. We really don't even know how 2020 is going to end at this point. But what we do know is that 2020 is going to go down in history for one of the wildest years with an insane amount of many unfortunate events, from COVID to protests to the loss of icons such as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Kobe Bryant, Eddie Van Halen, to the tropics having 5 named storms at one point. And now we've even moved into the Greek alphabet. I mean, whoa, 2020. So Felicia, before we even talk about 2021 and what we have to look forward to, let's just talk about the giant world-shifting year known as 2020. How did 2020 really play out in numerology?
Well, numerology gives us a lot of information about all kinds of things. And yet what we've talked about before and what we're talking about right now and today is the universal year energy, because in numerology, we can kind of gauge different cycles of time that we are going through personally and collectively. So this is the collective energy that all of us experience globally for during a year. So it's a very easy little addition problem. So if you take 2020 and you add it together, 2 + 0 + 2 + 0, it equals 4. So 2020 has been a 4 universal year. And the 4 in numerology, for those of you who are new at numerology, which I'm hoping and thinking that many of you are, and it's just are numerology curious. So numerology basically is an art and science that gives us an idea about that each number carries with it a vibration of frequency and data and energy and a meaning, right? So the numbers 1 through 9 have descriptors to them, and we can understand what energy is being presented to us by the number. So the number 4 in numerology is all about, guess what? It's about structure. It's about foundations. It's about hard work. It's about getting practical. It's like getting serious, sitting down and looking at your 5-year plan plus, right? And so collectively, though, I feel that this, and I think everyone, I don't think I'm alone here, would say that this is a very peak experience with this energy. And when we push it to the max, as it is right now, in my opinion, it's about foundations, right? In normal circumstances, it would be about, let's use the metaphor of a house, right? You have your house and you do your home inspection once a year, and you poke around and you make sure it's structurally sound. Maybe you put a paint, redo your deck, those sorts of things.
Right.
Well, this year you're poking around and you come to find out that there's been movement in the earth and your foundation is not stable. It's not safe. It's actually crumbling, right? So now what do you do?
Yeah, exactly. Now what do you do?
And so we could really think of it that way, that collectively the foundation to our lives, to our house that we are all living in globally, is no longer viable. And that's really what we're looking at, right? I mean, you stated at the beginning of this that all of these things that, nature is speaking to us. The climate is speaking to us, the earth, all of the things that, I'm stating the obvious, and yet it can't really be business as usual anymore. So this is really the review year where it's it's not going to be an overnight thing at all. This is the demo year. This is where you're demolishing the house, where you're demolishing everything, where you're jacking out the old structure, the old foundation. You're getting rid of it. You're putting it putting it in the landfill or wherever you're going to put it. And then you're going to reconfigure what you're building next. Are you going to build the same house with the same structure? Are you gonna, hey, maybe we have a contemporary design that we want. Maybe we add some square footage. Maybe we reduce some square footage and put more in the backyard. You know what I mean? Right. So it really is where we investigate this foundation of our lives. It's where we're working on these practical, pragmatic, longer range goals, right? None of this airy-fairy stuff. It's like a really, really pragmatic energy. And it's where we're really being asked to set up systems of organization, of management. And yet we have to have a clear plan first. So this is really all about clearing things out and formulating a plan. And we aren't anywhere near that yet, right? I mean,
that's what it feels like. It feels like we're still on that like shaky foundation of, I'm in my house, and it's so funny because I'm like literally ready to move. Like the foundation of my house is seriously going through the rough of it right now. So like this metaphor aligns with my life, but it's like, right. So I know I need to make these moves, but my plan still isn't all there yet.
Exactly. And I don't think anyone's plan is going to be there all there, be there all the way in 2020. I think that this has been a monolithic, monumental task to even start this demolition process, without someone, I don't know, without someone going down with it. And I think people have been going down with it, right?
Yeah.
Overarchingly, from COVID to riots to everything else. So with that said, I don't want to get into a vortex of despair, because it really isn't that. It's really looking at the necessity of getting rid of the old before you can configure what you want to build in its place. So it's also, the 4 is all about limitations and moving through them, moving around them, not letting them stop you, being able to see them for what they are, right? Being able to kind of look over the waterline. And that's something I think we're all experiencing, metaphorically and realistically with COVID. The restrictions placed on us, the limitations that go with that can be, seen as that kind of moving, being tenacious about patiently going through this, right? And go through those limitations. And then the last thing I would say about the 4 is that it's my opinion as a numerologist that it also, the 4 carries with it a necessity to heal old family, or in this case, globally, ancestral, cultural wounds.
Yeah.
And so those things are really coming up right now. We still have, outside of the United States, we have warring nations and parties and, factions and all of that. And in the United States, obviously, that affects, all the rest of the world in its way politically. We're having so much upheaval. So the 4 is living up to its name, is what I'm kind of trying to say.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say that's an accurate description of it. Is definitely holding up its name. So then it just makes me wonder, what do we have to look forward to with the 5? Because the 4, as you said when we first got on, I think people are going to want their money back with the 4 years. So please tell me we have a little bit of a break in the energy with the 5.
Well, it's going to be interesting. And before I move over there, I want to be really, really fair to the 4, because the 4 kind of gets a bad rap this way, right? As being like really hard and really serious and really all that. And yet the beauty of it is that if anything can get anything done, it's the 4. It is tenacious, it is hardworking, it is goal oriented, it is focused, it is really committed and devoted to honesty, stability, security, to building all of that, to creating all of that. So what a beautiful energy to really, work with this year to get things in a row, right? To get things there. So I just want to be, I don't want people to go away thinking that the 4 is
it's something to dread. Yeah, all the time. Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So with that said, let's talk about the 5, because the 5 is an interesting, in numerology, we're always kind of moving from one thing to another. And when we really briefly at the end of this go over personal years, you'll be able to really see how that moves, because the numbers carry with them those same defining qualities no matter where they show up. It's just a matter of contextualizing them and aligning them to the situation that you're talking about, if you know what I mean. So the 5, though, not personal year, excuse me, the universal year that we're moving into in 2021 is a very different energy than the 4. The 4 is meant to stabilize things before, as kind of a launching pad in some ways, a stable place to go from. So it's going to be interesting how that is globally this upcoming year, because there's been so much instability and we're not there yet, right? I think we can pretty much agree. Is that not just an opinion I have?
No, yeah. I mean, we're what, 10 months into this year, and I'd say like we're not ready to build the walls on our foundation yet. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So with that, the 5, the themes that we can think about for the 5 are freedom. Right? Freedom, let freedom ring. Risk taking. Some risk taking is going to be moving into the game here. And the 5 is the number of adventure, and of kind of that freewheeling, frenetic energy. And yet it can also lead to escapist tendencies, right? To rather than, to just do anything to escape responsibility or escape reality. Or also it can point us toward excesses, either overactive or underactive excesses in terms of being really fearful and really, being afraid of everything and not wanting to move, right? Kind of being paralyzed, or just kind of, oh my God, I want to do anything I want, however I want to, that kind of crazy energy that goes with that. So overall, really, I would say that 2021, just expect the unexpected. Expect the unexpected. And usually people like to think of the 5 as this really fun, social vibe. It's kind of, very tactile, super sexy in some ways. And I think people are really going to be longing for that on a personal level that extends globally, because we've been so divorced from human contact, right? We're all really, I think, psychologically and collectively, this is taking a toll on people, and children, and everything else. So it's really going to be shaking that out of the tree even more so. People really, really wanting that and feeling the urgency around having connection, around having that kind of connection. And yet, overall, to keep it in line, I would say that the 5 universal year is a year to be curious rather than judgy, right? Be curious, open yourself up. The 5 is all about flexibility and versatility. It's like this changing agent. The 5 overall is a catalyst. It's about catalytic energy. It's about moving things through. It's about moving things forward, right? So I would also say that this is not a time to be really hemmed into old ways, old thought forms, old ways of being, old paradigms. The 5 really demands new thoughts, new everything, right? Moving forward, not backward.
Wow.
And that's why that's an interesting thing, right? I mean, if we look at history, it's never worked when we've moved to a certain point politically, economically, culturally, whatever it is, and then there's a movement to want to bring things back to quote unquote the way they were.
Right.
Has that ever worked?
No, it doesn't, because then you just get even more angry people. There is more just civil unrest. Every time that we try to move backwards, you're like, we just work so dang hard to move forward. We're not going back.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be kind of a battle of those wills, which we're already seeing, right? And it's going to bridge over and extend into the energy and the fabric of 2021 as this is up for negotiation and navigation and all the rest of it. It's really the overarching element that needs to be really considered with the energy of the 5. I call the 5 kind of the ADHD number. It really, when we experience the energy of it, it is like the asteroids are coming at you, and it's hard it's just, there's so much going on, right? It's like a circus. It's like this chaotic circus, which we've really been experiencing even in this 4 year, right? I mean, this whole, in the US, the whole presidency and everything else has been such a, not only a 3-ring circus, a 40-ring circus. There's so much going on, right? I mean, and so it's a time where there's so much chaos, and yet the challenge point is going to be to find some focus, right? To be able to put on some blinders or some, to kind of not get distracted too easily by the bright and shiny objects, right? To be able to discern, to use discernment about what needs to be priority, what needs to be prioritized, and let the other stuff go. Sounds easy, right? Haha.
Easier said than done always, especially if it's that energy where you feel like you have to go all in or all out. Like, I can see how that can be really easy then to just give all of your energy to something and then be completely drained from doing so.
Exactly. And part of it is that being able to, it's a very delicate balance, being able to really ride the wave and embrace uncertainty, because I think if there's anything 2020 has shown us is that uncertainty is the new certainty.
Yes.
Kind of all you can count on is uncertainty. And so and yet, I say that kind of with a sense of humor, but also that it's really true. I mean, how can we embrace this level and find our own mooring within ourselves in some way that can allow us to move through this productively? And that's the key, I think, is with the 5 energy, is how do we come out the other side with something to show for it, something productive. and something more on the positive or constructive end of things. And it's really, it's a time to have fun if you can. The five is nothing but fun. And yet, you got to kind of bring some self-discipline in there, bring some responsibility where, to kind of counterbalance the fun parts. And it really is about, like I said before, freedom versus escape. How do we find our collective levels of sovereignty and freedom without taking away someone else's, right? So that's a big
huge.
one.
That is huge.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I like that you touched on freedom versus escape, because those are two words that, sometimes I even think just 2020 with the whole lockdown, so many people are like, I can't wait to travel again, right? Because that just feels very routine. People are missing their family vacations. Some people are just missing doing things that are shut down. Like my daughters were missing like the indoor trampoline park during the lockdown, like little things like that. And sometimes we can think like, I need an escape. And that word has a very different energy to it than freedom does. So that's also something I think we should be mindful to, like when we're paying attention to the 5 year, to really play heavy on the freedom part versus the escape part.
Well, exactly. And I think that, and again, I say it with a jocular tone, and yet it's true. It's like, rather than wine time, starting at 10 a.m. every day,
right?
Maybe, you know what I mean? It's like, maybe we can reconfigure this part. And I use that as a funny kind of metaphor, but I mean, come on, that's really something that people have talked a lot about this year, is the tendency to just kind of have to have something to cope with, to cope.
Yeah.
A coping tool. Yes.
And that can be everything from like a substance to literally just zoning out on our phones like zombies. Yeah. Like
absolutely.
Yeah, I know for my oldest daughter, her escape during it was like just being on FaceTime a lot with her friends. And then you're just like, then I'm realizing that like you're on FaceTime for 10 hours a day. And I'm like, well, okay. It's like,
seriously, this is like a lot. When their phone reports your usage, and your screen usage was up to 14 hours a day. You're like, oh my God.
Yes. Like, this is alarming. Okay. And I had to laugh too when my daughter had her yearly physical, and the nurse was like, how much screen time is she getting? And I was like, is this still a question? Is this really still a question in 2020? Yeah. I'm sure everyone's has gone up. From every child in America's screen time has gone up in 2020.
Well, it has to. If they're in school, that's how school is happening.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just so crazy of like how we used to judge things even last year have so fundamentally changed this year.
Absolutely.
And in 2021, we know that change is going to continue. But along with this collective energy of the 5 year, we're also each going to have a change in our personal year numbers. Will you talk to us a little bit more about personal year numbers, how to calculate them, and then the energy for each?
Absolutely. So personal years, so the universal year is more like that umbrella energy that all of us are experiencing globally. And then the personal year cycle in numerology indicates what we are going to experience individually. I call it knowing the theme to your party, because I think it's so much more fun that way. And it really does give you the energy that is supporting you. And is giving you a thematic, giving you a theme for what you're going to be, if you're going to be in the flow of your year, what it's going to be. And it gives you some great information about, maybe the caveats, maybe the other things that will come in as detractors there. So the way to calculate it is very simple as well. You would take your birth month and your birthday. What's your birth month and birthday? Do you mind?
Mine's January 9th. So 1/9.
So 1/9, and then you don't use the year of birth. Don't, toss that to the side for a moment and use the current year. So if we're calculating for next year, 2021, we've already talked that that is a 5. 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 1 equals 5. So that is 1 January, the 9th is 9, and 5 is the year. So you add those together, those three numbers together. So 1 plus 9 is 10. 10 plus 5 is 15. Now in numerology, we're always reducing to a one-digit number. There are a few exceptions there, but that's not just
neither here nor there right now.
Anyone listening is like, that's not true. And so it is true for our purposes for the moment. And so the 15 is reduced again. So that's 1 plus 5 equals 6. So next year, you're going to be in a 6 personal year. Was that your understanding?
Yep, that is
okay.
Correct. Yep, I'm
this
5. Yeah,
thinking of 5. Sorry about that.
I know it wasn't the best 5 year, but
yeah. Well, what I have found this year, honestly, though, if we step back, we can look at the heights and levels, the intensities around the intensity points that come in with our personal years, and how really, really under the microscope they've been this year. I mean, it's kind of like, it's kind of the turbo class that all of us are in. So with that said, if you are listening out there and you're like, oh, well, tell me about what my personal year is going to be. There's so much detail, but I'll just give you the basic theme, which is if you have a 1 personal year, you're starting a new chapter. It is the beginning of a 9-year cycle. This is the end of a 3-year transition point for you, a transition time. I call it a 3-year push time. So it is still going to pressure you. It's still going to make you work, but it's all about really opening up to everything having to do with the 1, which is new beginnings, new chapters. This is new seeds being planted. Things that you let go of last year are no longer hanging on. And now it is all about stepping into yourself. It's about independence, individuality. It's really a time where you feel where you kind of have to go it alone a little bit in terms of decisions and all of that. It's often a very career focused time, but it also has relationship stuff that goes with it as well. So a new chapter, planting seeds, and so plant them wisely and well in a 1.
Perfect.
Okay. A 2 is designed to be a kind of resting point. So the 2 is the number of relationships, of kind of love, it's patience. So often it's a nice time to kind of chill, relax, right? Chill out a little bit. It's going to be a very emotionally sensitive time. For business and all of that, it's a germination, it's a tending time of the things that you've been working on last year. And now you get to kind of go in and water and weed, but you get to watch it grow, right? And so in the meantime, it's a great time to tend to your partnerships, your relationships. That can be romantic, that can be with children, that can be with friends and family. It can also be with business. It's a time where you can really dig into finding your tribe. Really networking to find people who really are in alignment with you. So that's a 2, and it's going to feel like there's frustrations, delays, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back sort of thing, but it's all about right timing. It's all about the timing.
Interesting.
Okay, so trust it, even though you probably will be, at the end of the year, everyone in the 2 is like, can I start, can I get going? Yeah. So, and yes, you can, because in the 3-year, it's all about self-improvement. The 3 is about creative self-expression, emotional sensitivity, and you get it in spades in a 3-year. Any creative project you're working on is absolutely, if you're writing a book, doing a course, if you're even in the performing arts, this is a great energy to support all those projects. It's a time where if you've wanted to, learn hip hop dance or go play the flute or, stuff that you, put off, go do it. It's a great, great, great time for that. Anything having to do with communication is highlighted in this year, and your creative juice. It's also a time where you're probably going to come face to face with some emotional blockages. So that's in communication and all of that. So sometimes Those are served up to you on a platter, whatever is, coming at you in your emotional life. But it's really an expansive year for self-improvement is the 3.
Interesting.
And so the 4 is very much like we talked about in many ways with the 4 universal years. So we don't have to go too much into that, but it's about, taking those creative projects in the 3, moving them into the 4, and now doing something with them, right? Now you've done all this creative work. Now what are you going to do with them? What are you going to implement? And how are you going to do it? And it's a time to systematize it, to do the kind of arduous steps, to get it in place and get in line and get it done in the practical world. Because at the end of the day, it's going to make your life so much easier, so much more gratifying than it would be otherwise. And then it's also a time I find where people get to work with some old family, crapola that gets to come up to the surface. If you know.
So if you didn't have enough in 2020, you got even more in 2021. Yeah.
Right. And I mean that though in a very, very positive way, because it's often where you just get experiences and situations that demand that this come up and be dealt with either once and for all, or at least differently than it has been in the past in a positive way.
Right. Which is very healing.
Yeah, very, very healing. And so the 5 personal year, once again, taking all the great, if you've done your work in the 4, you can be off and running in the 5, and that's a time, when we can travel. It's a travel oriented year, very adventurous, again, super sensual and sexy. And, it's often where you feel like you've got pheromones on and everyone
it's like, ooh, yeah.
Yes. And yet ultimately it is a game changer. Toward the end of it, you got all the bright and shiny, so many new people, new experiences, new things coming at you. And then as you move toward the middle and the end of the year, things start to kind of fall away that aren't going to hold water for you. And yet something pivotal will change. It is a changing year. The 5 is a year of change. And so the 6 after that is a time to get a little bit more responsible. It's all about the 6 is kind of that cosmic parent, nurturing, visionary energy. It's a great time to focus on home, family, the domestic world, in whatever way you configure that in your life. It's often in numerology called the marriage and divorce year. So if you're in a relationship that's maybe sputtering, it's a time to, recommit, refocus on that. And if it needs to go away, it's often a time where it will go away. And this can be in marriage, romance. It could be in business relationships, all kinds of things like that. But it's always for the better good, right? And it's a time where you're going to just have a little bit more responsibility for friends, family, all of these things. Sometimes in the 6 personal year, it turns to yourself in terms of really asking about your relationship with you. What is your relationship with you? And then it goes out and you are reevaluating all of those. Who do I feel good with before, during, and after I'm with them, right?
Right.
And so it's also a time where you're evaluating your nest and your home, like that, even just as a feeling. Where do you feel at home? Where do you feel nested? It might be a time where you move. It might be a time, that sort of thing, or where you beautify your home or your garden in some way, in a substantial way. And then you move from the 6 into the 7. The 7 is kind of meant as a bit of a pause period, a little bit of, it is introspection, it is soul searching, it is spiritual seeking. It's much more of a time for introspection and kind of introversion in some ways. It's often a time where people are like, oh my God, I don't know what happened, but I just don't even want to go out. I just want to sit, take my warm, salty bath and go read a book, or something like that. But it's meant for that. It's meant to be in it's a collecting and knowledge data collecting time. Often it's more of a planning, organizing, researching year. And it's a time where you will, be asking yourself some of the bigger, deeper questions, who am I? Where am I? What is all this all about? Right.
Right.
The whole thing. So that can come into play. So many things for the 7, but that's the basic. It's very introspective. Then you move from that, you'll want to bottle some of that energy, because then from the 8 year up until the 1, it is that 3-year transition cycle.
Ooh.
So the 8 is it's a money year. The 8 is the money number. It is also about empowerment. So that whole 8 year is going to test you, and test you some more.
Whew.
So yeah, but it's really, most people it feels really invigorating and really empowering when you step into it. But I always say that the mantra for the 8 is step up or get stepped on, right? So
I like it. I like
you
it.
you got to think about that. And it can be anywhere from finances to, it depends on where you are in your life. Are you, if you, for instance, gosh, so many ways that we can be, are you struggling with an addiction and need some help? Maybe it's a year you get it, go to rehab,
Right.
get some help and really clean that up. Maybe that is your form of empowerment. Maybe your business is, needing to be taken to the next step, and you really make leaps and bounds that year. Maybe it's a year you're in an abusive relationship and you finally get the wherewithal and the sense of personal power to get out of it, right? All of these different elements of power and empowerment can come into play in the 8 personal year. And then you move into the 9. That is the end of the 9-year cycle of the personal years. And that is all about release, surrender, completions, letting go. It is a time where things that it's a reflective period where you're looking back and reviewing, right? It's a kind of like a whole year of retrograde in some ways.
Wow.
I'm just looking, going, okay, this has served its purpose. It's done. Now let's do this. Yeah, I need to close that out, or whatever it is. And then you got to hang out in the limbo for a minute. And that's what people usually don't really care for.
Yeah, that limbo is tricky. It's tricky to be like a holding pattern. Yeah.
And sometimes it's not even a holding pattern as much as it's moving. Things are happening, things are leaving, things are going away, but you don't have anything that you can wrap your brain around that is going to come in and take its place.
Ooh.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, oh, can I let this go? Even though I know it's almost like, isn't it this kind of insanity of, I'll just hold on to the known bad thing because I don't know what the next maybe possibly bad thing is that could come in, even though I know it's going to be better.
Right.
So it's that year, but it can be a year if you're ready. If you're ready to let go, oh my gosh, it's like dreams coming true, right? I even had a workshop one time, and this is a true story, but an intensified example, I suppose, is that I was giving a workshop. We were talking about personal years, and this one woman was like, "Yeah, I'm in this 9 personal year," and I was kind of like, "Okay, how's that working for you?"
Yeah.
You kind of got to really game it with people. And she was like, "Oh my God, this is the best year of my life."
Wow.
And she was in her 50s, and I was like, "Well, do tell, share." So she said, "I finally got a divorce. I've been wanting to get a divorce for such a long time. I got a divorce. My son just graduated college. He's got a job. He's gainfully employed. He's off and safe and good. I'm good with that. I quit my job. I moved from where I was living, and I've moved here to the city that I was in." And she said, "And I have no idea what's coming next, and I cannot tell you how excited I am."
That's amazing. That is so amazing.
Yeah. So with any good grace, you won't get all of those things in your 9 year. And yet sometimes that is the way to really start new. And it's not going to be without its difficulties, but the beauty of it is that, like, what's the next thing? Am I just going to stay stagnant in this holding pattern, or am I going to adventure out and try something new? And if it doesn't work, then I'll try something else new, right?
Those endings are really hard, but those beginnings
Yeah.
can be really beautiful.
Well, exactly. Well, and what is the song? Every new beginning is some other beginning's end.
That's
That's,
true. Yeah.
yeah. So some pop culture, philosophy
Little
and wisdom
little Green
for
Day in there. Yeah. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, so how could someone I know your personal monthly forecasts are a great resource, and you also have all these amazing master course classes to share. Will you share with our guests how they can connect with you further and gain their monthly personal forecasts and any other way they can connect with you?
Absolutely. Well, it's pretty simple. Just go to FeliciaBender.com, and that's the portal of all things for the numerology curious. I do have free monthly forecasts there. We've been doing some programs. We have some online courses, and you can, of course, find me on Instagram and also Facebook. And yet, the website is a great place to start. Oh, and YouTube as well. There's a YouTube channel. So if you're interested in your life path number and other things, that you can find some videos that give you some great information about that.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm telling you, if you're new to numerology, you will start with the rabbit hole. You just start going down. You're like, oh, I have a life path number. Oh, I have a monthly personal year number. And you just keep going and going. You have expression number, and it just doesn't stop. It just doesn't stop. And it's so much fun because I feel like with each piece of numerology, it's just a piece of self-awareness that you gain. And I find that I always know that about myself, but it's like I feel heard or maybe seen by numbers, if that makes sense. You're like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, it makes
I
perfect sense. And it's
right.
why I do this, right? It's
Mhm.
because it really offers an intense form of validation, you
Yes.
know? Yeah.
Yes, I love it. Felicia, it is always so much fun catching up with you and nerding out on numerology. Thank you so much for sharing today. And hey, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I wish I had a one of those, horns to blow
Yeah,
right now.
maybe I can edit it in like yeah. Love it. Felicia always has the best analogies, and I think that this was a perfect episode to get us ready for 2021. I've linked Felicia's website and social channels on this week's episode notes found on mindbizlife.com. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and be sure to give the podcast a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you tune in and turn it up. Next week, we are getting an update from Numerology's sister, astrology. Numerology and astrology go hand in hand, which is why I do these episodes as a series and back to back. So I'll see you back here on Friday for another episode of Fuel Your Life Friday. But until then, remember, every level of life is an opportunity to grow. Be well, my friend.